Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, May 5th Reparations Committee meeting. I am Councilmember Peter Braithwaite. We have a quorum. First up, we will have public comment. Vanessa?
Oh, hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Vanessa A. Johnson McCoy. I am a Evanstonian, born and raised, and I have been a full-time real estate broker here in Evanston for a number of years. My dad also grew up here in Evanston, and I have been a strong supporter of the Reparations Committee since I first heard about it, probably in 2019 or whatever that it was. And so I appreciate and thank you for allowing me to speak here today. It has been so enlightening to follow this work and be involved in this work to the degree that I have been. And it just has opened my eyes to some things that I didn't know before as a realtor, and seeing the differences in home ownership numbers, and when you look at the value of homes in certain areas of Evanston versus others. And so it just like opened so many, it opened my eyes in so many more ways, and just appreciating, you know, my parents and their struggles to buy a home in Evanston. This has been such an eye-opening process. I want to thank the committee for your work that you have done and continue to do. And I'm here actually just to make a quick announcement. I said all that to say that education is very important to me, educating especially people of color, the values and the benefits of home ownership. And so I've been trying to do that since I became a realtor, and I just want to invite everyone to come or tell others about a home buyers seminar that I am doing in conjunction with Liberty Bank, and it's going to be held on Saturday, May 14th from 11:30 to 1 o'clock at my church, which is Faith Temple Church of God in Christ at 1932 Dewey, here in Evanston, where our pastor, Pastor Moody, is a strong supporter of our member, Robin, and just he supports the work that the committee is doing and the whole principle of Black home ownership. So you can sign up. It's a free seminar. And there will be a luncheon as well, free box lunch. And you can register at libertybank.com/faith-seminar. And there's flyers out on the table. Again, it's libertybank.com/faith-seminar on Saturday the 14th, 11:30 to 1 o'clock, to hear about the process of owning a home, how to get your credit in order, make sure you're ready, how to get pre-approved, and the down payment options that Liberty Bank offers, assistance with down payment, etc. So again, thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you for your work that you're doing, and you know that I am just a phone call, text, email away. I'm a strong supporter of the work that you all do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McCoy. Next up, we have Mr. Bennett Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, take my thing off.
Yes, sir.
I've been here, I have the advantage of first being in Evanston in 1931, which is before most people here, right, Bob?
Yes.
And so I've experienced discrimination in every sense, and I think the plan is appropriate, what you're doing, but it's limited, and I would like to make a few suggestions. First of all, there should be a real estate investment trust set up, which will handle all the housing issues, whatever, mortgages, equity, and so forth. Then there should be a venture capital entity set up that would invest in businesses, but all this, of course, focused toward the minority community, Black community. The third part should be a not-for-profit healthcare entity that would handle all the healthcare issues, whatever they are, including education subsidies for people who want to go into the health industry. Then there should be a
Bennett, you said healthcare, what?
healthcare fund.
A non-for-profit healthcare.
Entity, yes,
Entity.
tax, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And the other one should be an education and welfare fund. I'm sorry. The health should be health and welfare, which not only include health, but also someone's buy a car to get to work kind of thing. Should be part of that entity. Then the fourth one should be the education fund, again, tax exempt, that would help subsidize education scholarships and so forth. And then finally, there should be what we call the Truth and Reconciliation entity, which is the same thing that did in South Africa, where people would come to the table, all Evanston people, regardless of race, and discuss the issue of race, so there would be a venting and a release of energy, because some people are so frustrated and so angry, they need to talk to each other and get to know each other. And this should be more or less the controlling group. Financing should come not only from the city, but with the venture capital group, the Evanston Chamber of Commerce, with the health group, the North Shore Health System, with the business thing, the Evanston Chamber of Commerce, because all of these groups have participated in the segregation and racism that exists in this town. The other couple of things is that we should not limit it to any particular time period, because it goes on even today.
Yes.
It started long before I got here, but it goes on today. Secondly, just people who are of African descent, because if you're black, I don't care where you're from, the islands, Ghana, or Mississippi, you are discriminated against and were part of that group that was segregated and so forth. So the other thing is that it should be spun, all these entities should be spun off. They should not be part of the political process for obvious reasons, because then they can't be manipulated. Only be manipulated are the needs and the wishes and will of the citizen. The other key part is that 85% of all the control group, boards, etc., should be black for obvious reasons. So that is what I call the freedom plan, and suggestions they have for improving what we have. And again, I want to congratulate you and congratulate Alderman Stratton. This is no longer on the former fault. Ruth Simmons for what she's done, because the start is, the fact that Evanston started it is much more important than anything else, because it will precipitate like a domino effect. Everybody in the country is going to try to outdo our town.
Keyword, try. Just to get the facts straight. Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Johnson. Is there anyone else that wants to speak during public comment before we move on? All right, thank you. Next, we have the approval of the April 7th Reparation Committee meeting minutes. Does anyone have an opportunity to review?
Yes.
Any questions or edits? Seeing none, will someone please move for approval?
I move the minutes for the April 7th meeting be approved.
I second.
Now I should ask it. Any questions or edits? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Item 4, we have communication. The first is the recap of the Reparations Acknowledgement Dinner. Who wants to go first? Go ahead, Claire.
I thought it was it was a lovely, first of all, the idea to have it, and it was a lovely way to acknowledge our ancestors and the people who participated in the program.
Do you mind putting some context?
Yes,
I was
so
gonna
it
use
was
this
a
for those
dinner
that were
at
attended. Yeah.
each of the recipients of the initial distribution, each recipient was invited, and they were also encouraged to bring along family members. And each recipient had a table and committee members were there, who could be there. And we had other people who had been supportive of the process. For example, Lionel Jean-Baptiste was there. Other people had been quite significant in the process. And also Mayor Biss was there, people who, community members beyond the committee that have been very supportive of the process also were there. And it was a chance for conversations to take place with the ancestors. One of the things that, and Mayor Biss spoke, our chair spoke, and it was a chance to thank and acknowledge the recipients for participating in the program and to get out more information, I think, about the program, that this is a first step, and that reparations, again, the housing distribution wasn't a prize or a gift. It was something that this was representative of a beginning to atone for the damage that had happened. I think there was a recognition that, there was definitely a recognition that it was not a complete repair, but it was a gesture, an important beginning. And the tone of the evening was one of thanking people for participating in the program, thanking them for coming to Evanston and establishing, as ancestors, establishing our Black community here despite the different challenges that they had faced along the way. And since the dinner, I have had a lot of positive response from some people who were hesitant about the program, who reconsidered when they got additional information as framed in certain ways, reconsidered what the challenge is, what Evanston is trying to do with the reparations program. So I found that very encouraging.
Thank you very much. Bonnie, Mr. Sutton?
Well, I just want to add that we did have Dr. Logan, Gilo Logan, and his wife there, who gave a program about libations, and you know, it's so important to recognize, as Claire said, our ancestors. But I also think it was very helpful to have the dinner so that the community and the world at large sees us following through. I think I even a week ago had someone tell me that none of the funds had been distributed and no one got any money. And I just thought, you know, maybe we need to do a better PR job of saying what's happening, and that's what the dinner did, so.
Thank you. Mr. Sutton?
Basically, I think it was a great offer to recognize a wrong that is attempting to be corrected. Secondly, I'm still concerned about the distribution and how long it's going to take for the remainder of people who will apply. I have a very strong concern about that. But every journey begins with the first step.
Yep.
And I want to continue supporting the members of this committee, but more important, the members of who have been damaged by the real estate practices here in Evanston, that this is an attempt to alleviate and to give us another chance to do the right thing.
Thank you, thank you. And in terms of your concern, we do have an item on the agenda for discussion that will address that issue, so thank you. Did you want to say something?
Unfortunately, I was not able to be there because I was dealing with COVID at the time, but I also have heard great free feedback from the community and the families that have reached out with appreciation in the effort and acknowledged the occasion, the dinner, the libation, how important that was. And Bonnie, to your point, and just miss and incomplete information in the community, I think it was a really missed opportunity in recent local reporting that the incredible, unprecedented milestone of us beginning to disperse reparations really had not been reported. And If we're not communicating properly, then who else would? So I'm recommending that our communications department, or we can discuss, I'm recommending for discussion that we put out a press release from the city officially stating a recap on the dinner and a report that disbursement has begun and reparations is flowing here in Evanston.
Yeah. Did you receive the first draft?
I didn't.
I'll send it to you.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of, so, please, Claire.
Just, oh, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
I'm done.
You know, before I pass over, I just thought, and we all made our comment, I really want to thank you, Tashik. As always, superwoman with getting everything
Indeed.
together.
Indeed.
Such a beautiful job.
So she beat me to the punch, because that was like the first on my list, to acknowledge our staff. But with that, did you want to, I was going to join in that, but she's like the woman of few words. So for those of you who haven't had attended, this process was difficult, because again, we don't treat this as an award and a celebration. However, we recognize the relevance of it. And so it was two parts, just to acknowledge the families, the first 16. Ms. Barber set that up very well. And the work that has been done built on, obviously, the work that you have spearheaded over the years, and we did celebrate that. But in terms of the families, I would agree. I think that it was well executed, and a lot of that had to do with the work of our staff, Tashik and also Audrey Thompson. And the reason why I lift that up for anybody who's paying attention for other municipalities, it is such, an important, that we note the effort, not only the leadership of our committee member, Robin Simmons, the support of our city council, but then also the detailed support and work of our staff, as well as our community allies. And all of these efforts is what helps us to move forward. I also want to thank all the committee members that were able to attend, Mr. Sutton for being able to share a word of prayer and the benediction, Claire, Ms. Barber for the well-written letter that really captured the moment, as well as Ms. Lockhart, your presence as well. I also want to acknowledge the volunteers. You were able to have members of the NAACP, and that was very instrumental just in terms of the service and their presence, so thank you for that. And then, Tashik, please tell me the name of the caterer. I'm embarrassed that I left my bag. What's that? Nicole Henry?
Yes, you're correct.
Nicole Henry, who catered the event, and it was delicious. It was delicious. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move on. More to come, definitely more to come. Next up, we have item B, Reparations Financial Donations Report. Staff recommends the Reparations Committee accept and place on file the May 1st donation report. Do you want to just give a quick overview of that, please?
Good morning. So as of May 1st, the city received $69,253 in donations to the Reparations Fund. No donations were received in April. So same as.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
We received $69,253 in donations.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions from the committee?
Yes. Do you happen to know, again, we've made some expenditures. I think this question at this point is in line. Do we know how much money is sitting in the reparations fund right now?
So we budgeted $400,000. Do you want to add the if you add the 69?
I just want to know like the year-to-date actual total right now.
So we have distributed, let's see, 2 payments to community partners for affordable housing, who we're partnering with to administer the program. So I don't recall the amount, but I could get that to you.
Yeah,
But we did
The
distribute 2
base
payments.
question, and that's been asked before, I'm sorry to interrupt, is until we get another dispensary, we don't publish the monthly amount coming in. but we do report out all the expenses.
Correct. I'm not looking for the monthly amount coming in. I'm saying because we've made expenses, because it's been several years, at this point, if we were to disclose how much is sitting in the fund right now, and it would not,
Violate state law?
I don't think it would violate state law. And we can look into that. Certainly, I'm aware of, I think this committee has to be aware of what is in the reparations fund, and the fund, because we have one dispensary means that we have to be somewhat opaque about how we disclose the information, there still is a rule within state law. There is a form that allows the city manager and the CFO to delineate who has access to the sales tax data. And I would just ask that members of this committee, whether it's just the members of council on this committee or the entire committee, be added to that list so we have authorization to look at the sales tax data in relation to what's sitting in the reparations fund. I think that's critical, at least for this committee, to be able to know.
Chair Brinkley?
Thank you for
I
your
want to
comment.
confirm that discussion point 5A, it looks like we're going to talk about that in
Yes.
more detail. I wanted
Yes.
to make sure that was the place to talk about it.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much. Thank you for your report, seeing no more questions. Next, we have for action and to place on file just the reparations financial report. Would someone like to move that?
Move approval?
Second. It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Next, we have our first repair update from Ambassador Robin Simmons.
Thank you, Chair Brinkley. There really aren't many updates, but one thing that I did add that I didn't have on the update before was an international component to reparations. And the framework in which we look at it falls under international law. It's important to note in 2001, the United Nations at the World Conference Against Racism in Durban declared the crimes of the transatlantic slave trade and its legacies, crimes against humanity, and that reparations are due for people of African descent in this nation. Of the 166 nations that were in attendance, 163 adopted the declaration, and that didn't include the United States and Israel. So I just wanted to note that there is a very broad discussion on reparations. And then in terms of HR 40, there is no update. There is more of a call for executive order. With the state bill, there's no update that I'm aware of. I'll look more closely into it. And the county has invited the discussion of reparations. In fact, I'll be doing a presentation there for Cook County Commission on Social Innovation today at 4 o'clock. If you're interested, it'll be on Facebook Live. And then with the local efforts, they continue to grow.
You said it's on Facebook Live. How would someone follow it?
I think you go to the county Facebook page.
Okay.
Unless they have their own Facebook page.
Okay.
Before the meeting is over, I'll find out
Thank you.
exactly. I
Thank
just
you
have
so
a
much.
flyer and a login.
Perfect.
But in terms of the local efforts, as Alderman Braithwaite and others, Bennett Johnson mentioned, the nation continues to be inspired. You can learn more about the number of initiatives at redressnetwork.org, which is the African American Redress Network. There are now over 400 local initiatives, and they have a map. It categorizes the reparations initiative in the form of repair, whether it's compensation or restitution, rehabilitation, and so on. And I think that was really it in terms of updates. And then always going to recommend that the community get the education firsthand, the information firsthand, and not on social sites. You have access to the committee and the city website, which is cityofevanston.org/reparations. Learn the facts and the details there. Also, as it relates to the faith community and the RSAE, there aren't many updates to note, but do look for more information in June for a reparations panel discussion to be hosted and moderated by the Evanston Community Foundation and the RSAE with Saul Anderson as the moderator for that. And as soon as we get those details, we'll share it with the community.
Can I ask you to speak, because I know we both were taking notes for Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
The areas that you touched on, Ms. Johnson,
I would love to speak to that.
and I'll call them out. So the venture capital, the non-for-profit dealing with the healthcare, the education fund, truth and recognition, and then North Shore Healthcare, which I think addresses the issue of the trauma that we experienced.
So I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Johnson, or Bennett. He told me to call him Bennett. So that every time I do that, I feel like my
Just because
grandmother.
he says so, just.
So Bennett, we have no disagreement with Mr. Johnson and the approach and the depth and the broad look at repair. And that is consistent with what we as a community worked on in 2019. What we did was move forward with a narrowly tailored, under the direction of our staff and our attorney, remedy based on the harms. The report, you can read those details. It's done by Dino Robinson and his team and colleagues. But really, Mr. Johnson is right. And that the city can't do all of this. So since 2019, this has always been a call to action to other institutions. There are other institutional accomplishments in the city. It is not the municipality alone that is responsible. And how many more times do we have to say that, and do I have to say it, before there is some acknowledgement, at least, that they will begin to do their part towards repair? And so, Mr. Johnson, I think you really are inspiring us and holding us accountable to be that convener. And I hope that as we move forward in next steps of reparations, that we can give some direction to our institutional partners on the role that they might play while we do more, because we have not done enough even as a city. And so we've taken this first step at housing. We know that our resolution 126R19 also includes economic development and educational initiatives. And we need to get there quickly. But I just wanted to acknowledge, I think we all want to acknowledge that we hear you, Mr. Johnson, and I don't think we have any disagreement with you. And also, if anyone wants to see the long list of recommendations, it's on the website from 2019 that came from the community, some within our purview, some are not. Much of this is beyond the capacity of the government, and this committee alone is going to take a community-wide effort for repair.
Thank you very much for your comments. And so something, I saw your hand. Please go ahead, Claire.
I wonder if, and I know you've given a thorough coverage and update of different legislative efforts. I wonder if you could just take a minute to talk about the effort that's happening in the legal piece in the judiciary with Tulsa. And their nuisance claims, statute limitations, et cetera.
Yeah, so quickly, Claire brings up a good point that there are other ways to pursue reparations. And there's legislative, there's a political process, there's this moral debate. And Tulsa, Oklahoma was successful after years of a legal claim for reparations for the race massacre that murdered and plundered black wealth, the Black Wall Street. So they will move forward with a trial to hold the city of Tulsa and other government bodies accountable for what happened at the Tulsa Race Massacre that's been 100 years ago now. So I imagine we'll see more examples of that, where communities and stakeholders are frustrated with government bodies and not doing their part, and they take it to the courts. We'll see what happens with the legal pursuit, but that is one way. We're seeing the moral argument with religious organizations, churches, schools, other institutions that are beginning to do their part with repair as well. And so there's no shortage of ways to pursue reparations, to deliver reparations, and certainly an argument about which one is right. All of them are due. And so I think that is more of the conversation that we want to have here on this committee.
And if I could just say a question that I get a lot about it, so just as a point of information, some people have found some of the reparations cases that are proceeding in the court confusing as they're going through on this nuisance claim, which when we think about our common conversational use of the word nuisance and why is a nuisance play, it's getting some traction with this because other claims which would seem intuitively more appropriate have come up with statute of limitations issues. And so nuisance has, that has been an avenue that's been more successful. So that's just a question I get a lot.
Helpful information.
Thank you. And so just something I want to share, because you've talked about this in the past, an impact study. Next month, I've asked our health department to come and present the work that was done by one of the staff members. At HSC, it was called the Evanston Project for Local Assessment of Needs, and it's something that the Illinois Department of Public Health requires that our department do a 5-year plan. I thought it was extremely comprehensive. It was just a draft, so unfortunately I didn't have anything to distribute. But next month, once it's final, and what the staff member in the health department did, she looked at the needs across our community, and it mirrors everything that we discussed in terms of reparations. So unfortunately, in terms of the areas where we're at the bottom of the list was housing income as it compares citywide, we being the Black community with a specific focus on West Evanston, which, no surprise, is in line with the area that was redlined. It talked about the divestment of businesses, as well as, again, there were some income comparisons. And I think sadly, it also showed in terms of numbers of arrests, trauma, wellness, we're at the bottom of that list. So I thought it was a really important document for the simple fact that it really does, for anybody who is confused or still have questions, it was an independent kind of report that shows the welfare of our Black community, which I think underscores the work that we're doing. So next month we'll have a complete report on that, and you'll be able to see the information and ask questions. Thank you very much for your report. And then that brings us to item A, which is the Restorative Housing Program Budget Amendment. At our last meeting, we've spoken informally about this. It is clear, just based on the fact that we only have one dispensary in town, that it's a slow process for us to be able to award the folks for our first initiative. I always want to stress that, the first initiative. So I've asked that, we've had this discussion to put on the agenda to come up with a way so that we're able to increase the budget to the 2.6, so we're able to support the 106 remaining beneficiaries under the ancestry category. And then after that, we also need to address the larger number of descendants. And meanwhile, we are executing this. Tashik, along with an intern, are continuing to validate those applications. So Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know that we've had some specific discussions about it, and if you can update the committee in terms of our options. I hope at the end of this conversation that we'll be able to move this to City Council for a larger discussion. Thank you, Nick.
No pressure. Good morning, Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Counsel, City of Evanston. So we've been talking among staff and talking with the CFO about exploring ways in which we could raise money to sort of to be able to fund the reparations fund. And so the suggestion from the CFO is to either use a no-interest loan to the city by a bank or a GO bond. The only concern the law department has with respect to GO bonds is making sure that we actually use the revenue from GO bonds for a race-based program. Generally, GO bonds are used for things that benefit the community generally, not for a specific group of folks. And so that's something that we would need to research with respect to GO bonds. The concern of whether we could repay the GO bonds using the revenue from the cannabis tax is apparently alleviated.
Yeah.
But the question of whether we could get a no-interest loan from a bank and pay the bank money from the cannabis tax is still an issue as well, because not all banks can take, because it's a federal, cannabis is still a federally scheduled narcotic, so banks can't accept funds from it.
Point of information.
Yes.
I mean, I would have to, just on face, disagree with that, because where do we put the money that we receive from the cannabis sales tax now?
It's an excellent question. I'm not the CFO. But my guess is that there are probably banks that are chartered in Illinois that might be able to, because it's legal in Illinois.
Sure.
But generally speaking, those that are FDIC and have federal regulation, that's been sort of an issue with dispensaries in general, where they can stash their cash, right? So, it's something that I'm not saying is completely foreclosed. It's something that we would have to research and make sure that can be done.
Thank you for your comment. Nick, I know we had a discussion about the possibility of there's a cannabis infrastructure bond.
Yes, it's a newer product that's essentially specifically for this. I guess they tried to explore it in Colorado. I guess our CFO is not really keen on the idea. I did share the information with him to see if it would be a cannabis municipal tax bond or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I did share that information with him as I shared with you.
Yes.
And he wasn't necessarily too keen on it. It is a very, very relatively new product.
We do have reservations that the underwriters might have reservations since it's not federally legal.
Got it. Are there any additional questions from our committee before we?
Before you step aside, and I'm sorry, because I know you'll be repeating some of what you said, but with respect to the first option of the bond, and you were saying the use, can you explain again I'm trying to wrap my head around the legal piece, because you think it would have some kind of equal protection implications?
Yes. I don't want it to have an equal protection
No,
implication.
I
So I want to make sure that it wouldn't.
I
Yeah.
understand. So what about the discussion that we talked about at the dinner, that the reparations program, the repair to the community benefits the entire community, whether or not you are a specific recipient. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, and it's certainly an argument that can be made. I just want to make sure that we would not run afoul of the 14th
And not
Amendment.
inviting, yes, use up the whole thing, lawsuits, I got it.
Yes.
So I think the takeaway conversation for the committee and those that are sitting in our audience, oh, I didn't sound.
As-
Are we still in
as-
discussion?
Yes. We're still, so I was just responding to Nick. No, it's okay,
No,
but then I'll
go
wrap
ahead. I'm
it.
sorry, I didn't want you to close it out.
No, thank you. So is that we're pushing our staff. We are all very conscious and aware of the fact of the sense of urgency, particularly with our ancestry group. So we're pushing the envelope, and we're trying to find ways outside of the one dispensary that's coming in that will help us to move forward. So we've had a number of conversations with our staff to continue to push it. This was just to let people know publicly what we're doing. And then once we find a solution that will fit our need, then we'll move it forward to our city council. Simmons, and then I think you had to comment. Thank you.
I don't think I have any more questions about geo bonds or, bonding it in general, or even the cannabis bond. I think this is more in line with the direction that Councilmember Reed is going, is we do have more than the $400,000, and we allocated the $400,000 with a projection on what we would have by that time that was now a year ago. So right now, today, we have some amount of dollars above the $400,000 that's been allocated, above the $69,000 community contributions. And I would like us to allocate the rest of the funds. And so without knowing what is in the budget, it's hard to call a number. I mean, I would feel confident in, asking that we allocate an additional $1 million from the reparations fund for this particular program. I'm doing it blindly, not knowing, what's in there. And if it's 400,000, if it's 200,000, I mean, I know that we have collected more sales tax revenue from cannabis since the first allocation?
So based on the conversations we had with the CFO, and the pace that is coming in, the amount that would be left in the fund, after the allocation of the 400,000 would be enough to give awards to approximately 5 people.
Okay, so even with that, when we began this process, cannabis sales tax revenue was not even the leading recommendation to fund it. It worked out well because of where it was at in state, and it was kind of a divine moment in history to capture that. But there are other ways, and one of those ways, just putting it out there, this isn't a recommendation, but it was one I felt strongly about, was the graduated real estate transfer tax. The year before we implemented reparations, we passed a graduated real estate transfer tax for property sold above $1 million. Our harm is largely in housing and in that space, and it was appropriate. We didn't pursue it because the cannabis piece came up. There's a lot of hope about the revenue that'll come and the future dispensaries and so on. But I think that we have responsibility as a committee to be thinking about additional ways to fund the commitment that are also going to be sustainable. I believe there's a great future for cannabis. We don't have the dispensaries yet, but we can have additional ways. Other communities and even our own should strongly consider funding, $2.6 million of ARPA dollars. There's no reason why we can't. Providence, Rhode Island is doing it. Other communities are exploring it. I see that you're shaking your head no, but we've seen it done by communities that have been inspired by what we've done in Evanston. So I would love to know if that's already been vetted as an impossibility for us.
So I wouldn't say it's an impossibility. It is problematic to use ARPA dollars because once again, those are federal funds. And so the federal government dictates to us how we can specifically use those funds. Now, the direction from Treasury does allow us to direct some of those dollars to particular communities, which just so also happen to be black, right? But the issue is that we would not be able to probably use it specifically, although the vast majority of the money could go into the black community if the city council so willed dollars for ARPA to be allocated in that fashion. I did send, I thought, to a few of you an example of a community that tried to do this with the CARES Act, and those dollars are tied up in litigation right now because that community tried to actually do a reparations program, not similar to ours. I believe theirs was something completely different. I don't think they even have the evidence that Evanston does, but those dollars are now tied up in litigation when they try to use federal dollars under the CARES Act, which was the first, before ARPA there was CARES. So that's the only reason why I shake my head. It's not an impossibility. You and I have been at this a long time. You know that I've learned to not to say like no, it's just not yet. So that would be something I would want to research, and the same thing with the graduated real estate transfer tax. That's actually not a bad idea. The one thing that makes the the cannabis tax work is it's not a general obligation tax. And that's what would get us in trouble is if it's, let's say real estate taxes in general, right? That's a general tax that everybody pays, and so then you could have a taxpayer challenge because those taxes are supposed to benefit the general welfare of the town and not supposed to go to a specific group. But if there's a tax that's paid by, it's sort of voluntary, right? You don't pay the tax in cannabis tax unless you're buying cannabis from the dispensary. Or even the real estate transfer tax. You don't pay that tax unless your house is sold over $1 million. Those might be a little easier for us to work around in terms of dedicating those dollars for a specific program that is what the federal government calls a suspect class.
Do you mind getting us a memo on the feasibility of using the graduated real estate transfer tax?
Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to something really quick. So I'm acknowledging Nick and Corporation Counsel Cummings because you have a very difficult task, and I think in our conversations, he is extremely passionate about this work, believes in it, and at the same time, you're doing your best to make sure that we're protecting the corporation and not slowing down our efforts in navigating a minefield with blindfolds on. And so I recognize how difficult it is, and I just want to say thank you very much because it's part of the conversation that leads us, that allows us to, lead others. So thank you. Councilman Reed?
Yes, thank you,
Let me
Nick.
jump in and say one thing. I'm sorry. Thank you. Our attorney, our corporation counsel, Nick Cummings, is, I know, you haven't told me, but I know it, that cities all across the nation are calling you and looking to you as sort of a mentor and a advisor, or at least, you know, a potential reference to how complicated this work is. And so I know that doesn't do anything for the program, but I just think the community should know how hard the staff is really leading the nation in this new way to address repair that really had not been considered before 2019. And I just had to give that shout out.
Yeah, it's important. It's important. You can't say that enough, so. Councilmember Reed?
Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you, Nick, and the team and everyone here just leading on this stuff. I want to start off with a few things. First, I fully support the idea of using that increment. You know, some folks, you know, said it should maybe go to affordable housing. I think reparations is just as good, if not just as good of a use. You know, Evanston was the first community in Illinois to have a graduated income tax, and I just want to state for just a little thing here to toot my own horn is that when I ran for clerk, the clerk dealt with the real estate transfer tax, and I put forward a proposal during the campaign to create a graduated real estate transfer tax. So I'm glad that that was taken up. It was original thought stuff there. Anyhow. Beyond that, so I fully support that. I think we've seen a good amount of money coming in from that graduated tax. I think it's a solid source of revenue, and it'll help us diffuse the monies in the reparations fund and give us maybe a better accounting. I do want to note a few things about the about the 2.6 million thing here. I don't know. I would suggest that we do not need to bond out or receive a loan for this money. Given, I'm looking at the March 31st quarterly report, financial report for the city, and the quarterly report states that our current general fund balance sits at $37 million. We know from our financial reports that we received at council recently that in 2021, the city came under budget 10%, which means $30 million. So we have $30 million extra, and then we spent over $11 million that shouldn't have been spent, but or that should have been spent but should have been authorized. So there's about $20 million extra sitting in our general fund, and our general fund balance requirement is to sit at about 16-17%, which would be, or maybe a little bit higher than that, but that would come out to about $17-18 million. So we are well above what our general fund reserve is. So a $2 million transfer from our general fund without having to go through getting a bond or worrying if how we're going to pay it back or any of that stuff, we could transfer $2.6 million and have no worries about our general fund balance. So that's one. And then two is I'm looking at, I don't know if there's some kind of disconnect here, but I'm looking at the financial report, and the plain numbers when you go to the reparations fund for the financial report, again, I didn't put this information out, it's sitting right here in the document, say $267,000 are sitting in the reparations fund. So either our financial report is incorrect, or maybe it is correct, and there really is $267,000 sitting in that fund right now. It's not showing expenditure, so I'm curious if right now, so I'll leave that. So I'll say that there's that sitting in the fund according to the March report. So I guess my recommendation is that we just make the transfer from the general fund to the reparations fund without going out for a bond, without, putting the taxpayers at on the line for paying, interest or anything else for these monies.
Thank you, Council. And just something I just want to respond in, because we haven't really addressed this in a second round. So along with the award, there's a lot of support that goes to these families. And we had a very robust conversation, I think, 2 months ago about the role of SEPA. But the reality is, what we've learned from our first 16 is everyone who has, and that's about 80% of the group, who has chosen just to do the home repairs have requested that they have an entity to support. And so I know that we have had a very robust conversation about it, but something we will have to come to terms with is, as we accelerate the disbursements, we also have to be mindful that there is support that's needed. So I know that within this committee, we talked about it, there was, you know, a recommendation and strong urge to find a Black entity to play that role. You know, we're open to that. And in many situations, well, we'll just have to see if they're willing to help and do it, whether they're doing it by way of donation or if there's going to be a fee, because that also will have to be part of the budget. Again, I can't predict what the next 106 will decide, but out of the 16 who have elected to do the home repairs, they have asked for assistance to help to manage the process. And I think it's something that in the next 2 months or so, we'll have even more information just in terms of their satisfaction and how that process is worked out. You wanted to say,
Yeah, I was going to. I could
who?
wait.
Okay.
I just have a so maybe both of you can answer this question, just for a point of information.
Yeah.
So if we're aware of other entities that are Black-owned that could offer similar services, how do we connect them in appropriate ways to vet them before they're brought to the committee? Not wanting to dump all that into Sheik's lap, or what's the appropriate way to go about with that connection?
I think that anyone who has a connection, there's a very clear, there's a public document we can have Tashik send it out to the committee that reflects, I can't even remember how many months of talking to SEPA, just going through. It was about 4 to 6 months of dialogue of making sure that we hit all the areas of support that was based on, you know, the current work that they're doing in the city of Evanston and other municipalities. I think that would be the place to start, and whether you want to, Nick, we flip that to a RFQ, request for RFP, request for, that would be, just to respond to our question, that would be one approach, because I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that's a template that organizations or institutions can look at to say that, okay, that's a starting point. And then from there, they can pick and choose which areas.
I just want to make a point of order, because I know right now our discussion is really talking about what our council talked to us about.
Yes.
And I think that it's important to stick with that. And I know I hear you all talking about these other things, but I was very excited to see on the agenda today that there was a proposal for funding the 106 other beneficiaries. And I think that, you know, in looking at the memo, it really just talks about giving them direction, providing direction to the city to do that. And I think that in this committee, and especially in this time frame, there's no way for us to discuss all the possibilities. And so I'm just making a point of order that we stick to deciding if we want to make that recommendation.
And Tashik, can I just quickly respond by saying, let's put it on next month's agenda. I know that we're going to get the health department, and we'll figure out what follow-ups. I mean, this is all, there's all a sense of urgency with all these conversations, so I appreciate your respect for the time. I know that we're almost at that moment. Yes, I will. Coming back to you and coming back to you.
Quickly, I wanted to say that there is in fact a Black entity, the nation's largest Black multi-billion-dollar capacity, that came here from out of state, from Louisiana last month to present and offer just that support that SEPA is offering. So there is interest, and whether it goes to a competitive process or not, there already has been a Black entity that has the experience and capacity to do that. So I just want to, we don't have to search high and low. There's the interest now. And then I also want to add, as it relates to the, funding the balance of the ancestors and Councilmember Reed's recommendation, and thank you for paying such close attention to the budget and, you know, other possibilities. Not at all dismissing the GEO bond, but there is a real opportunity right now. If the city is committed to reparations, then I don't see Councilmember Reed's recommendation of using our funds out of line of our values here. And so that would be a real statement to have that support from the general fund if it were available. So I want to continue that for discussion. My style would be call the question right now. You know, I'm trying to learn to operate in this new space as a committee person, but I want to be on record as supporting Councilmember Reed and thanking you for that recommendation.
Chair.
So I was going to respond quickly, and I think maybe we're on the same page. The fund balance that he's referring from is a mid-year report that our staff has to do. It's actually, they did it a few months earlier. And
It's a
so,
quarterly report.
So again, we've received it. It's part of the mid-year report that we've received early. And so we still have a whole rest of the year funding. So it's correct. In one column, we're 30+ million above where we need to be, and then in a few other columns, city manager's office, et cetera, we're running a deficit. So I think it's important to note that when we say, or I have said, we are pushing the Corporation Council to find funding, all of those things are on the table. And so that's all part of that conversation. We're not leaving anything out. Corporation Council.
So I just wanted to respond very quickly.
Thank you, sir.
The 267 in Reparations Fund, according to the March report, based upon what our conversations were with the CFO, does not include the expenditures that are outstanding for those folks to go through CEPA. So all the funds haven't all dispersed, and we just left with 267. There's still some pending disbursements need to be had. The second thing is about the general fund transfer. It's certainly within the city council's purview to do that. I would not be doing my job if I didn't caution you that that would open up the ability for people to have standing if they did want to challenge the program. Right now, we have very, very, very narrow on who can actually challenge the program. But if you transfer dollars from the general fund to the reparations fund, you open it up now to anybody who's a resident of the city of Evanston who actually has paid taxes into the general fund.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. And again, I'm going to be respectful of time. I just want everyone to know that we are looking at all the options. You've received a report. If there are any additional comments beyond that, you can always send your concerns directly to Corporation Council. I would ask respectfully to copy me as well so we can keep track of it.
Chair, I'm
Can you-
seeking recognition.
I understand. I'm looking right at you, I understand.
Okay.
So Tashik, before I forget, I'd also like you to please send a copy of the SEPA document directly to Committee Member Simmons that can be shared with Liberty Bank in terms of what has been done with the past. Keeping in mind, we are still learning from that process, so I think there may be some things that we can tweak along the way just to fine-tune that document and figure out a winning formula moving forward with the other recipients. Councilmember Reed, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you. I just want to note that I really wish our CFO was here today, and I'm hoping that at our next meeting, our CFO is present. I trust Nick on issues of jurisprudence, but I'd love to have our CFO here to answer questions of finance. And I would just also push back on if we use general fund dollars, that it would open us up to more litigation. The cannabis tax dollars could have been allocated to the general fund, just like any other dollars we can choose to allocate to whatever fund we wish. And the cannabis tax dollars would go to support the community generally if we chose not to put those funds toward reparations. So I'd just love for us to look at that. And then also for the next meeting, if the restorative housing budget discussion is over, I would like to add for consideration that certainly at the next meeting, I'd love for our CFO to be here. Certainly would love to discuss just making the transfer. I think if we made the transfer from our general fund to the reparations fund, we could, I think what I'm hearing here, what I heard from member Claire and from others is that maybe we're looking to generate the 2.6 million by going to a bank and asking them for the money. Is that what I was hearing? Is that what I was hearing you say to put on the agenda when you instructed Tashik to put?
No.
What was that then?
Allow me to be clear in what I'm saying, and this is consistent with, in terms of how we've led this committee. I would suggest the conversation that you want with the CFO, that you allocate some time and do that offline. And then when there's something for us to take action on, then we can bring it forward to the committee as well as share it publicly with those that are paying attention. And in the interest of time, I just want to note your comment completely.
Well, I'm sorry, just
Pardon me, if I can respond.
I was
If I can
in my
respond.
time and you jumped into my time. If I
No, but again, I just want to respond by saying I'm encouraging you to have that conversation between now and the committee. That's my point. Finish your comments, please.
But my question still was, what was it that you instructed? There was a conversation about, working with institutions, it seemed like black institutions, and an RFQ you mentioned. What was that RFQ about that you mentioned earlier, and you instruct Tashik to put something on the agenda for next month?
What I suggested to Tashik is that we bring back, I guess basically a report in terms of the work from SEPA. And all of this is in pilot mode. And what I also suggested to her is, because the original component that I added was that SEPA's services are valuable to the disbursement for the first 16. As we are accelerating with the other 106 beneficiaries, it's important that they have the same support as the 16. I can't stand here today and say that they're going to continue to do it. As we accelerate the numbers, we also have to provide that support.
Thank you for the
that's
clarity. So you're saying that RFQ is about another partner to help the 120 some odd ancestors?
I want to
through this
respond
process?
directly and say to you that we had a robust conversation about this, and that there was a desire to expand the work that SEPA's doing. We don't have to wait, Councilmember Reed, to the next meeting to talk about it. I directed Tashik to send the information to our committee member to send it to the bank. That's what the direction.
So yes, it was a yes or no question. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And seeing no other information in front of us, we will adjourn our meeting. Thank you all very much, and thank you so much to the members of the public for being here. That's right.
Okay.
We're wrapped up. Thank you all so much.